Welcome to the cannabis compliance updates for September 2022 in the southern region. All right, the first update is out of Arkansas. Arkansas court asked to put marijuana legalization measure up for vote. So cannabis advocates filed a lawsuit asking the Arkansas Supreme Court to overturn a decision by the state's election commission to keep a proposed constitutional amendment legalizing recreational cannabis off the November ballot. Responsible Growth Arkansas asked the state's high court to overturn the Board of Election Commissioners' decision to shoot down the proposed constitutional amendment because of its ballot title and name, the Arkansas Democratic Gazette reported. Responsible Growth Arkansas has submitted enough signatures to make the ballot, but the election board rejected the adult use petition. The commissioners said that the measure did not completely describe the impact the proposal would have had, but by not clearly stating whether edibles would have a THC limit. The amendment issued recreational cannabis cultivation and dispensary permits to businesses that already hold medical cannabis licenses. An additional 40 licenses would be awarded via lottery. In the lawsuit, the advocates contend the election board's overly stringent approach violates the state constitution and challenge a 2019 law that authorizes the body to certify ballot measures. Responsible Growth Arkansas is hoping for a preliminary injunction before the August 25th deadline for certifying initiative measures, the Democrat Gazette reported. And another one out of Arkansas, Arkansas High Court approves marijuana legalization measure for the November ballot. Funny how that works. So the Arkansas Supreme Court issued a decision today ensuring that a statewide measure seeking to legalize the adult use cannabis market in Arkansas will appear on the November ballot. The ballot measure allows adults 21 and older to purchase and possess up to an ounce of cannabis. The initiative's language does not permit for home cultivation, bummer, and it does not contain provisionals to expunge past records, also a bummer, or to provide for opportunities for social equity applicants. What the fuck? Come on, Arkansas. All right, switching on over to Maryland. Maryland officials certify final text of marijuana legalization ballot question and provide summary ahead of November vote. Maryland election officials have finalized the language for a marijuana legalization referendum that will appear on the November ballot and have issued a formal summary of the reform proposal. The legislature approved two cannabis measures in April. One to put the question for legalization to voters as a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and a complementary measure that will lay out the implementation framework if voters approve for the initiative. The ballot did not require action from Governor Law Hogan, Republican. He let the other measure take effect without his signature. Last week, Maryland Secretary of State John Smith certified the final text of the cannabis measure, designated as question 4, that will go before voters. While the question itself is fairly straightforward, the legislature's nonpartisan Department of Legislative Services also recently published a summary of each of the questions that will appear on the ballot, including the cannabis measure. It gives context to the proposed reform and describes its relationship to the separate implementation legislation. Legalization would be subject to a requirement that the General Assembly pass legislation providing the use, distribution, possession, regulation, and taxation of cannabis within the state. Summary, which was also approved by the Attorney General's office, says that before detailing the provisions of the complementary HB 837, as well as laying out what the state's current cannabis laws are. Quote, 18 other states have legalized recreational cannabis use by adults, the summary notes. A total of 37 states regulate cannabis for medical use by qualified individuals. Maryland has had a medical cannabis program in place since 2014. Del David Moon, a Democrat, promoted the cannabis legalization ballot question on Twitter, urging Maryland residents to register to vote or request an absentee ballot. Under the law that would be enacted if voters approve legalization at the ballot, the purchase and possession of up to 1.5 ounces of cannabis would be legal for adults. The legislation also would remove criminal penalties for possession of up to 2.5 ounces. Adults 21 and older would be allowed to grow up to two plants for personal use and gift cannabis without remuneration. Maryland operators are trying to figure out what adult use sales in 2023 might look like. So just high level, unless if you live there or pass through regularly, Maryland can be easy place to forget. Small, wedged in between more places like Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. You're invited to think of it as place away somewhere else. But when it comes to cannabis, that would be a mistake. Maryland's medical program has over $42 million in sales last June between 103 licensed dispensaries and 18 growers, and all of that is expected to hit the rock boosters, since voters are expected to approve question 4, a straight up or down question by a wide margin in November general. So just some things. I don't see that legislators are going to approve unlimited licenses in Maryland, said Tracy Lancaster Miller, a dispensary owner and president of Maryland Medical Dispensary Association. We see that in other states, and that doesn't work with the price drops. We're asking them to pay attention to how to create a more limited license market to create opportunities for social equity applicants, and so small businesses are able to flourish. Partly in anticipation of the coming adult use laws, Garcia says SunMed recently expanded its 60,000 square feet of greenhouse to include 150,000 square feet of outdoor grow. We knew a referendum was on table, said Garcia, and we solved the demand of where the medical market was. It's $650 million market for medical recreational. We'll put it at a $2 billion. Yeah, exciting stuff. I think it's in the beginning, so we'll see what happens, All right, we got an opinion piece talking about Oklahoma. Opinion, gray market cannabis shops open doors for vape crisis 2.0. So just a few years ago, this country experienced a vape crisis in which more than 2,000 Americans were hospitalized with lung illnesses associated with vaping, and 60 people died. According to the U.S. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the agency's investigators found that the cause of the crisis was linked back to illicit products that contain vitamin E acetate. The vast majority of products that were causing the vaping-associated lung injury, E-Valley crisis, was products obtained on the street by contained this additives. And I just want to say, this did not come from the regulated market. The big tobacco was just blaming cannabis, and this wasn't coming from licensed operators. Anyway, ever since the legalization of cannabis in New York in April 2021, the gray market has been allowed to thrive. Cease and desist letters were sent to it a few months ago. We've already talked about this in New York, so go take a look at the northeastern region. But this article is also talking about Oklahoma as well, and just the gray market that's happening over there, because that state can't get a grip on their regulated market. Okay, another one out of Oklahoma. Oklahoma won't vote on legalization this November. September 21st, the Oklahoma Supreme Court unanimously rejected a lawsuit brought by the legalization campaign to ensure that their measure would appear on the November ballot. The campaign accused Oklahoma state officials and a third-party company hired this August to verify signatures of slow-walking the process and thus hindering their efforts to get legalization on the ballot before the state begins printing ballots. Proponents flagged the issue a month ago when it became apparent that the process was moving abnormally slow. The Oklahoma Supreme Court ruling means that the Oklahomans will still vote on question 820, either during the 2024 general election or sooner if Governor Kevin Stitt, Republican, calls a special election. All right. And then last update for you all out of Virginia. On the first day of September, Virginia's Cannabis Oversight Commission held its first meeting since January. At the start of the meeting, David May, an attorney with the General Assembly's Legislative Services Division, provided an overview of legislative action related to cannabis in 2022, a year during which the state was set to adopt a regulatory framework for adult use sales. This year ushered in major changes in Virginia's political makeup. Democrat Governor Northam's term ended and Republican Glenn Youngkin took office in January, and significantly, Republicans took control in the House of Delegates. It quickly became clear that the once smooth-ish path forward in adult use industry has been disrupted with hurdles. After months of debate over dozens of cannabis bills in the General Assembly, only 2 made the cut by the end of the session. They pertain to medical cannabis. All right, and there are your cannabis compliance updates for September 2022 in the Southern region.